CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach to accounting and rise to each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills. CTBK goes above and beyond by lending helping hands in the Buffalo and Niagara community through volunteer work and donations, and is partnered up with Victory Sports for 2020 and 2021 to keep kids in the community active. The professionals at CTBK are determined to help individuals and businesses succeed. Whether a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400, and see what CTBK's one-team approach can do for you.
Thanks, as always, for checking out Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times. By the way, I was just asked the other day about the New Bronstein Times and where that could be, where that could be checked out. So it's working.
I answered that one interested party.
What's this?
But I answered on Twitter the one interested party that wanted to know what it costs to subscribe to the Bronstein Times.
But this was an actual query I had regarding New Bronstein Times. I think the one on Twitter was obviously tongue-in-cheek.
I see.
But this was an actual proposition. The person wanted to find out where he or she could read the New Bronstein Times. I don't know why I'm being so secretive as to this person, but
people had asked me before about Bronstein Enterprises. Like, is that a real thing? Is that really what you call yourself? I was like, no.
I was having fun with it there. You know, I always had a different thing. And then I think you just got tired of it and decided you had to have the New Bronstein Times, which is a fine newsletter that people should know that Jonah prints out on his mimeograph machine and hands out to his neighbors. Which it's admirable. Well, it's an admirable effort.
You never really got the joke, did you? I called myself the New Bronstein Times because there was the day there were all these rumors that the Athletic was merging with the New York Times. I was like, well, you know what? Me too. I just merged with the New York Times, and this is what we call ourselves.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, I think it's a hell of a marketing device, and it's working. Obviously, people are asking about it. Jonah. The Buffalo Bills coming off a difficult loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, we talked about that earlier this week. We also got into UB looking for a bounce back effort, which will be difficult to do against Coastal Carolina Saturday at noon. We talked about that earlier in the week. So if you want to get Jonah's analysis on UB versus Coastal Carolina, check out that episode.
Number 16, Coastal Carolina. First time in 7 years, there'll be a ranked opponent at UB Stadium.
It's been that long. Oh, wow.
Baylor in 2014.
Any word on what kind of crowd they're expecting there?
I think they're hoping for a big crowd. We'll see who shows up and what happens. I haven't heard any buzz that like it's near sold out or that it'll be a difficult ticket to get. There'll be a lot of students, and that'll drive the attendance number probably.
Sure. But I don't think that this is because Coastal Carolina is ranked. The casual fan is going to go out and see this game. Probably.
Well, that's what I'm interested in looking at. I don't know if they will or won't. I thought maybe had UB won last week, and this could be a game where they would be trying to play themselves into the rankings. We've talked about that. There were no crowds last year at UB Stadium. I was interested to see that they make new fans. Judging from week one against Wagner, I didn't notice that a lot, except that the students were really into it, and we'll see tomorrow. Ranked opponents do. Baylor, when they were here 7 years ago, draw about 24,000. My hunch is that this game tomorrow won't draw as well. It's also on ESPN2, which sometimes gets people excited to be on TV.
So you can also head on over to Amherst Pizza and Ale House, probably for pre-gaming and post-gaming for that game. The game will be on the TVs there over at Amherst Pizza and Ale House, which is where Jonah Bronstein and I go on Sundays after the Bills game when we're done working. Jonah, your thoughts on this Bills game? Any additional input other than what we already discussed earlier this week?
Well, I think, and we could talk about this a bit more later with Joel, I like the Bills' chances a little bit better in week 2 because they lost in week 1, even though sometimes you can look at it and think they lost confidence, or maybe the fans lost confidence in the Bills, or the league has figured things out, figured the Bills' offense out. I think with their backs against the wall, regrouping some game plan things a little bit, the Bills will come out and play much better. It's also maybe a better matchup for Josh Allen with the man coverage and the success he's had against the Dolphins, even with Brian Flores as the coach. And unless the weather and the heat really affect the Bills, which has happened in years past, but not in the recent past in this game, I think the Bills will at least put on a better showing offensively and play better and be in a better position to win. And I don't want to say it's a must-win game, but it's as close as it gets in week 2 against a division opponent that you don't want to fall 2 games behind and see the tiebreaker at this point so early in the season when you were the heavy favorite to be division champions.
Yeah, Josh Allen 5-1 in his career against the Miami Dolphins, with that one loss being it should have been a win. He made a great play at the end of the game down there in Miami Gardens, scrambled and heaved the pass into the end zone that Charles Clay dropped, and that should have been a Bills win.
But do we think that matters? Is there some sort of magic, Miami magic, that Josh Allen's never going to lose down there, or does that maybe set up it to go the other way and the Bills lose a game in Miami with Josh Allen at quarterback now?
Well, you already mentioned it with the man coverage, and I wrote about it after the game against the Steelers, in which the Bills have been struggling against teams that play predominantly zone coverage, and the Miami Dolphins are a man coverage team. So that should be in Josh Allen's favor. The fact that he plays well down there, I do think that matters with a guy like Josh Allen. We were talking about, and he even admitted it. So did his coach and his offensive coordinator, jitters, getting too amped up, getting too emotional, all that type of stuff. Well, he's at least shown that the emotions don't get to him on the road maybe as much as they do at home, and certainly in a place like Miami Gardens where he's had some success. So maybe he's in the right frame of mind. I don't discount that as an actual issue that he, or any athlete really, but it seems in particular that Josh Allen needs to navigate on almost a weekly basis, is not getting too worked up heading into a game. You hate to hear it. I mean, it's something that you'd like to think as a fan is that all your players that you root for tune that stuff out, or at the very least ride or use to their benefit in terms of fuel, whether it be the boos or the cheers. But Josh Allen seems to be something that he has to traverse on a game by game basis. And his head coach and his offensive coordinator this week were talking about getting ready, getting in the right frame of mind, all this type of stuff. It's something that you probably shouldn't need to worry as much about as a guy in his 4th NFL season, as seems to be the case, at least Sunday against the Steelers, it was a factor.
Right. He's played in front of crowds before. I think the advice is, settle down and play football. I don't know if there's some additional relaxation techniques he needs to get into at home games that he might not have to do on the road. It reminds me of a story. I know a junior college basketball player that was having trouble with nervousness, and the coach told him about lavender is a good thing to calm you down before the game. And then he lathers up with this lavender lotion, and he can't catch the ball all game long because in his attempt to relax, he messed up another one of his senses. So don't do that, Josh Allen. But I think the crowd thing's a little bit overblown. Maybe it was a factor in this one game, the first game back, and there was a tremendous amount of energy in that stadium and noise, and maybe it trickled over. But usually that helps teams. If it hurt Josh Allen ever so slightly, it should have helped everybody else. And I don't really think that's going to be an issue. What I want to ask you, based on some of the things you've written about at The Athletic, for this particular matchup, let's assume the Dolphins continue to play some man coverages that the Bills like, and they want to spread it out and throw and lean on Josh Allen having that kind of success that he's had in this matchup. How do you square that with, do they need to run the ball more and get the running backs involved, specifically more in the running game, and maybe run Josh Allen less? Do you force that in? Do you think they should run the ball more, or do you lean into Josh Allen in this matchup and get him back in a rhythm because it might work out well that way?
I'm not a proponent of running for the sake of running. I think there are a lot of people out there that just take a look at the lopsided plays and see pass versus run and say, well, it needs to be more balanced.
And you think some of those people include Sean McDermott, the head coach, that might want to see more running?
I think so, but it works. What Brian Daboll does works. And I know that I wrote about it this week. You know, I floated the idea of maybe giving Ken Dorsey the opportunity to call some plays, for the reason being, I mentioned it, just because Sean McDermott has done that in the past, and it was on the defensive side of the ball. Week 2 of the 2019 season, he has the play card. He took it away from Leslie Frazier at halftime of week 2. So 6 quarters into that season, after the Bills had ridden their defense to the playoffs just a few months earlier, Sean McDermott lost enough patience with the highly respected Leslie Frazier that he took away his play calling duties at halftime of week 2. And I just kind of wondered what the line is going to be for Sean McDermott to keep letting Brian Daboll call plays when it's clearly frustrating the head coach. He was frustrated with that after the game, even though he said he needs to do, Sean McDermott saying he himself needs to do a better job on 4th and 1. I made it a point to ask him, what could you have done? You're not the play caller.
Well, but he's in the headset. He knows what they're going to run.
So does he veto? Should he have vetoed Brian Daboll in that situation? Which is head coach? Sure. But so that means you have a disagreement with your offensive coordinator in a critical situation. Sean McDermott last year in the playoffs against Baltimore, when Brian Daboll ran one designed run play and with 3 minutes left in the first half, they ran 3 total times that first half against the Baltimore Ravens. One of them was a scramble and another one was a kneel down. Technically, there was only one designed run. It broke a record in the NFL for a playoff game in which a team didn't run in the first half of a game. And Sean McDermott after that game said we were way too out of whack, or way out of balance, I think was the exact phrasing that he used in terms of play calling. So he's been frustrated with Brian Daboll before. I'm just interested to see, and again, this is a little bit of a tangent. I wrote about it at The Athletic. You can check out that story of Sean McDermott has a history of wanting to kind of keep even his coaches in check a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if he would even dare to let Ken Dorsey maybe mix in some things, or if he finds his frustrations with Brian Daboll get to the point where some changes need to be made.
Well, I think the big difference between this and the situation with Leslie Frazier a couple of years back is that was the head coach who had previously been a defensive coordinator and calling plays on that side of the ball, stepping in and saying, I'm going to take over and fix this in the now. And he ended up going back to Leslie Frazier later. I think with Ken Dorsey being a subordinate of Brian Daboll on this staff, and Brian Daboll being a offense coordinator who's never been a head coach before, to take that control and play calling privilege away from Brian Daboll after one bad game, especially with the success they had last year, the success he's had developing Josh Allen, would be pretty, I don't know if it's reckless, but it would be dramatic. And it would be a much different dynamic than it was on the defensive side of the ball a couple of years ago. But I do think you can bridge that maybe by, during the week, emphasizing we want to do more of this type of running the ball or whatever it may be, and less of some of those plays that didn't work, or some of those plays that might get Josh Allen exposed to injury. Whatever Sean McDermott believes was missing from the game plan last week, talk about getting it into the game plan this week. But I don't know, maybe in this matchup, that's not necessary. Maybe throwing the ball on every down is how the Bills beat the Dolphins, and that's what they should do.
Ken Dorsey is a coordinator. He's a passing game coordinator. That's a title that was added to his job as quarterbacks coach prior to the season. It was going back into the summer, I think. So he does have a coordinator title, but you're absolutely right, Jonah. It is a subordinate aspect, and that's a great point to make. Whereas the head coach taking it away from the coordinator is moving up the ladder, having Brian Daboll step back and let Ken Dorsey have a voice would be going down the organizational ladder. You're right.
And if it's still an issue 4 to 6 weeks from now around a bye week, maybe you make a change then. But to do it now would be pretty alarming. Yeah,
that's absolutely alarming. I think would be the right word. I reached out to a trusted a trusted source with the Bills when I was writing that story, and bounced it off of him. And that was kind of his response too. It would be way too soon. It would be too rash, but it was worth exploring because Sean McDermott has done this in the past. And of course, he's a defensive coach, so it's him taking it away. He's been a defensive coordinator. It would be probably well.
And he's made knee-jerk reactions with quarterbacks after losses, sometimes when the defense played poorly and they
putting Nathan Peterman out there for Tyrod Taylor, or, there's all kinds of things that he has done in the past. Of course, you could look back and say, well, he was a lot younger of a head coach then. Maybe he's a little more settled. But when you're looking at possibly going 0-2 and being 2 games behind the Miami Dolphins, even though there's still 15 games to play, Sean McDermott, it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to this type of thing. Story that I wrote in The Athletic Friday about the Bills' downtown stadium. You might want to check that out. It gets into some details as to why the downtown stadium will not work from a economic standpoint, or at least it's not as
realistic.
It's not as tenable. It's not as sensible as Orchard Park and building across Abbott Road. And namely, the number that stood out to me from my sources is that infrastructure downtown in a new stadium would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And it can't really be priced out because a lot of it involves property acquisition. And of course, once it's known that a stadium is going downtown and you start snatching up property, the prices start to skyrocket. So it's kind of difficult to estimate that, but you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in property acquisition, moving a power substation, things like water mains and sewage and exit and entrance ramps off of the 190. It's a massive infrastructure ordeal, hundreds of millions of dollars, as opposed to across Abbott Road, where the footprint already kind of exists, where the roads in and out already exist, where all the things that you need for a stadium already exist and maybe just need to be moved a couple hundred feet or whatever, just to divert it to a different place. Less than $10 million. I mean, if that doesn't cut to the heart of why Orchard Park is more feasible from a taxpayer standpoint, when you're looking at the state dollars, it just seems to make too much sense. So, but I know that you had some thoughts on the downtown stadium.
Well, yeah, I've never been in favor of the downtown stadium for all the reasons that you expanded upon in your article today and put numbers behind, because it's always been known that it would be much more expensive, much more difficult, much more red tape. I mean, you wonder if a project of that scope would ever even really happen. It would take longer. It would clog up downtown in a lot of ways. I'm not sure it's the best way to develop downtown waterfront land. I've always felt that way about like the Outer Harbor. That's been a popular place where people say put the stadium there. It belongs in Orchard Park because it's worked so well in Orchard Park for 50 years. The tailgating infrastructure, if you want to call it that, works there. The traffic, even though it was difficult traffic getting there this past Sunday, tends to work. There's a decent flow. People know how to get in and out of there. I do think that maybe more time should be spent or more attention should be paid toward the option at UB, because as your article noted, that cost somewhat the same. There doesn't seem to be a huge difference in the sticker price of building a new stadium at UB and combining it with the state land and things like that, and being more of a state university community asset in that location, which also does have a highway infrastructure going in and out of there that could work. I don't know if that's really where you want to land, but it might be worth exploring at least more than the downtown option.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, I don't really have a problem with where the stadium goes. I think in a perfect world, I would like it downtown, because I'm a believer that a healthy downtown is, or when you're talking about the city, the county seat or whatever it is, a healthy city is a healthy county. I think there's, but
you can debate whether a large football stadium that doesn't get used that often with parking lots, gigantic parking lots surrounding it, is good for the downtown. I don't think it is.
Yeah, I get that point too, but there's also all that land that's been down there forever, and nothing's been done with it. So if they're fighting over the land and what to do with it, all right, fine. But it's just been sitting there. The one thing though that I didn't include it in my story, but I did find out in talking with my sources regarding a downtown site is the reason they don't want to put it up against the river or right on the water is because it eliminates a big a big chunk of getting in and getting out when you're backed up against the water, unless you're bringing in people by ferry. Then you don't want it right up against the water. So that's why it's kind of nestled right up against Interstate 190 there. But all the different parking ramps that would need to be built, and the fact that tailgating would be scattered all throughout to the different neighborhoods you're talking about, into the Old First Ward and Larkinville and the Perry district and all that stuff, and not connected, and all the walking that would have to take place from your parking to or tailgating to the stadium. And there's so much that's involved with it that you don't have to worry about in Orchard Park. But regarding UB, my roundabout way, getting back to that, I would like to see a little bit more on that too, but I think it's a little too late in the game. And Governor Cuomo, when he was in office, just kind of scuttled that option.
But he's not in office anymore, and he's not the king, so I don't know why he had autonomy to just make that decision unilaterally if that's the way it happened.
Right, but I think I think you could probably reignite that. Sure. And I think that it would be beneficial to the project to have UB at the table. So that way you could then more palatably to government officials, to the community, to the public, whatever, say that this stadium will be a benefit to the campus. Our football team will be playing in this stadium, similar to Las Vegas has UNLV there. University of Miami plays, at the Dolphins Stadium. There's a handful of NFL stadiums that also host the local college. The Pitt Panthers play at the Steelers Stadium, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think it would be.
And you can justify the investment of state money a lot more when you say it's going towards a state university and a multi-use project. Along parallel lines, I think the public and the representatives and the people involved in these negotiations should push back and explore more the options of building a retractable roof and not reducing the capacity down to 60,000 from where it is. Maybe having a bigger stadium if that's something that benefits Bills fans and the public. And the psychological aspect, I think Buffalo fans love having some of the biggest crowds in the league, and they don't really want to cede that and give that up and not maybe be the loudest stadium or one of the loudest stadiums any longer. Aside from and also the seats that are getting eliminated are probably lower cost seats. They're going to price out and squeeze out 10, 12,000 loyal Bills fans that always go to games. And I think that's something that if half of the project is public money, more time and more thought should be put into the scope of the project and what the stadium will be, even if it's in Orchard Park, and not just let the Pagulas and their consultants and by proxy, Jerry Jones and Stan Kroenke and these other NFL owners tell Western New York what stadium should be built. It should be a community state decision with input from the Bills and the Pagulas, but not what the NFL thinks the state and the community wants.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I am having some sort of seizure. It's actually my dog insisting that we play tug of war while I'm doing the podcast. So I'm sorry if I'm looking a little out of sorts here. Jonah, you had some thoughts on vaccinations.
Well, just some follow-ups on what we talked about right after the news was announced about the new vaccination policies at the Bills and the Sabres games. I think one thing that, I've seen different things on this. Haven't got perfect clarity on this, but I do think that if masks and other measures, testing are going out the window because everybody is required to be vaccinated, I think that's asking for a problem, and I don't know why that would be the case. It does sort of seem, especially indoors at the arena, it does sort of seem like they're going to say, if everybody's vaccinated, we don't need the masks, and that could be problematic. And also at the same time, it's interesting. I'm looking at the reaction that you got from unvaccinated fans on Twitter and Cole Beasley and Reed Ferguson and the interactions that they had. And now the Bills are going down to Miami, which a lot of fans travel for that game. A lot of Bills fans already live in Florida and come to that game. Florida is, at least was, a very much the biggest hotspot in the country. Since the Delta variant has taken hold, there's less restrictions. There is not a vaccination policy, I don't believe, to get into the stadium this week. So a lot of travel, a lot of congregating in a area where the virus is circulating higher. It seems like an interesting conflict to what we're going towards and working towards up here. And I don't want to be, too pedantic about it, but I think it's interesting to see what's happening and whether these road Bills games are going to be kind of anti-vax celebrations now. I think there's a certain segment of the fan base that's going to be going to road games and not coming to home games. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, in a place like Miami, there are going to be a ton of Bills fans down there. That's one of those games where they circle as soon as the schedule's released. They want to get down there to Miami, although a little earlier in the season. You want to go down to Miami in October, November. You don't want to play this game in September in terms of being a fan and wanting to use the excuse to go on a road trip. It's supposed to be like 90 degrees and thunderstorms, so the humidity is going to be crazy. Not looking forward to that, but whatever. I'm on the plane tomorrow. I'll be heading down there, and I'll have to be out in it at least before the game for my Channel 4 pregame duties. But there's a reason I didn't stay in Florida. The weather is probably the top of the list. There's several reasons I didn't stay in Florida, but when I was working for ESPN, I could live wherever I wanted, and I didn't want to be in Florida anymore. I didn't enjoy it.
Well, you're not a Florida man.
I am not. I'm an Ohio man, which is like close though. A lot of weird shit happens in Ohio too. In fact, that's a Shred and Reagan sub topic, isn't it? Is it Texas, Ohio, or Florida? You have to guess which. Isn't that the bit? They give you
Niagara Falls,
Niagara Falls, right? All right, Jonah, let's take a break here. And when we come back, we'll have Joel Staniszewski on the line from Vegas to talk about pretty rugged week for Joel in the betting standpoint. And he's going to give us some more picks to try to claw out of the hole. And now we bring into the show Joel Staniszewski, our resident odds maker, handicapper, gambling analyst, on the line from Vegas. Joel, week one was not kind. In fact, I don't think I have ever seen you have a week like this, at least not on our show.
It was a rough one. It was definitely a rough one. I've mentioned in the past, and I'm sure you could Google it and find it, that I don't like betting week one because you haven't gotten a feel for anything, and you can base it off of last year's games and last year's stats, but it's a whole new world each year. So week one, I'm always a little leery on, but I made my picks. I stand by them, even though I wanted to make there's a lot of asterisks this week. I don't know where the hell I came up with a Minnesota Vikings play. I went back and I looked through my notes. I had nothing. I said nothing about the Minnesota Vikings, but I somehow played them. But I'm going to take it because had they won, I would have been like, yeah, I was right, Minnesota Vikings. But I have no idea where that bet came from. So
you made 7 picks last week. On the Bills, you went 1-1. You had obviously the Bills, and you gave the points to the Steelers, so that was a loss. But you had the under, which was a pretty comfortable under. Mm-hmm. But overall, 1-5-1. I have to state it for the record, and I found it interesting on the push, which was Detroit +8.
Backdoor.
16 points in the final minute 53 of the game to get to the push.
Right.
You were that close to being 1-6.
And that game moved. That game ended at like 9.5. So if you got it later on, you were stoked with the bet. which my actual betting that I put in, I actually got an 8.5. So, but for Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by, I am
CTBK, CPAs and business consultants.
Exactly. Not doing, had a rough start, but I'm making moves. We're making moves. We're going to get it back. Don't bet scared. Don't run away. Keep plugging ahead.
Well, let's maybe get into that, because we haven't really had an opportunity to discuss the mindset, the philosophies, the approach that you take after a bad week, to go 1-5-1. What would be your advice to someone out there who's coming off a bad week like this?
Just stick to your normal betting habits and your strategy, and don't what you'll see with a lot of games. And even when you're listening to TV shows or podcasts, there's the overreaction after week one. The Bills are awful. They can't score. They all that stuff, or for any team. So you don't overreact. You don't make knee-jerk reactions when it comes to betting. You don't lose and then all of a sudden triple your bets to try to get your money back. You just be consistent, stick within your means, bet enough. The way that I look at it is I bet enough that if I win, I'm happy that I got some extra cash. But if I lose, I'm not hurting for money, and I'm not like, well, shit, there goes my rent money, or there goes my car payment, or there goes, whatever. You bet enough to have fun with it. That's the whole point of gambling. You're supposed to have fun with it. You're supposed to, enjoy it. And as long as you don't get crazy with it, then you just keep on plugging ahead.
The Bills going to Miami on Sunday to play a division game after starting 0-1, with the chance not only to go 0-2, but the Dolphins to take a 2-0 season start after beating the New England Patriots last week. The spread is 3. The Bills are giving 3. Some places you can get 3.5. With a total of 47.5 or 48. Joel, your thoughts on this one?
This is one of those ones where my heart feels one way and the numbers tell me another way. We've had this discussion many times when we're talking about the Bills. I feel the Bills are going to have a bounce back, and they're going to play much better, and better play calling, better execution. And I think they're going to win. But the numbers tell me that this game at 3.5 is too high. It should be closer to a pick 'em, maybe the Bills a small favorite, but not 3.5. So I'm still on the fence. So it's one of those, do I go with my head or do I go with my heart? So if I go with my head, we're going Dolphins plus 3.5 and under 48.
Are there any trends with what you mentioned about the Bills coming off of losses under Sean McDermott? It seems like, as you were saying, you like the Bills a little bit more, or I do, coming off a loss than had they won in week 1.
Yeah, the Bills recently under Sean McDermott, especially a majority of last year, made really good halftime adjustments. And week 1, they didn't. Whatever they were doing, just not finishing drives, but moving the ball and being consistent, they just stopped. They were making mistakes. They were going for it on 4th. They weren't completing passes, at a normal percentage that they normally do. And then they're going for it on like 4th and 8. Some of these moves that they were making was just, I feel like they were just like, they were playing as if they were still in the groove from the end of 2020, where they could get a 4th down a play and get it. And instead they were just going backwards and just making, bad plays, bad offensive holding calls. Josh Allen had no time to throw the ball. So it was just it was like they went backwards. And that's what a lot of people were saying. Like, oh, this is like the 2019 Bills, not the 2020 Bills, where you just kind of saw them making just foolish mistakes. And if Josh Allen is going to progress from 2020 into 2021 and be that franchise quarterback that he's now paid to be, this game is a huge game for him. That's what makes me think of it, not so much as anything trend-wise that I've seen. Now, I'm sure there's got to be numbers as to what Sean McDermott does after a loss or after a home loss, but I haven't seen it, so I can't really speak to it. But just from a feel of the Bills themselves, I would hope that they would make a comeback and bounce back to the team that they were last year, that we expected them to be so far this year.
Josh Allen has really good numbers against the Miami Dolphins. He's 5-1 in his career, with the only loss being that game in which Charles Clay dropped that what would have been a fantastic game-ending touchdown a couple of years back. So 5-1 with a 64% completion percentage, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's also rushed for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns in those 6 games. So high degree of success against Miami. Of course, that's different coaches. You're talking about Adam Gase, Brian Flores just taken over last year. All kinds of different things in that regard, different personnel. You can't just say one way or the other that he's got the Dolphins number, although he's just had incredible success so far. Your thoughts on this as a Bills fan, as a division game, Joel? And as I said in the setup, if the Dolphins win this game, that's now not only a 2-0 start for the Dolphins, but a 2-game lead on the Buffalo Bills.
I look at this as, importance-wise, the most important game of the week in terms of how it affects the teams. The Bills lose, we're down 2 games to inside a division. Dolphins are up ahead of everybody. It's a very, very important game. Miami is definitely a much better team than they were last year, and they were a really good team as the season went on. The difference being that they kind of pulled the trigger, moved around back and forth between Tua and Fitz. So the fact that they can have a full off season of Tua and just kind of go with him, I think is great. When we talked, or when people talked, or anyone talked about the Bills off season, they said, look, we need to figure out what's up with our cornerbacks and our guards. And they drafted 2 defensive ends and 2 tackles. And so our guards and our cornerbacks are still a problem for us. And especially the cornerbacks, it was abundantly clear that, our CB2 was still not where we wanted it to be, where we wanted them to be. And, hopefully this is the opportunity that the coaching staff and the players have to really step it up and get their shit together.
And you're confident in that. Obviously, you think that the Bills are going to win this game. You just don't like the fact that it's the spread is 3.5.
Correct. Yeah.
What other games you got, Joel? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jonah.
I think he's doing the Bronstein hedge where
I am.
Wins either way.
Exactly. I like Miami plus the 3.5 and under 48. If the Bills win by 1, then I'm super stoked. Right. I get that middle. The Bills win by 20, then I'm emotionally stoked, just not financially stoked. So the Bronstein hedge is in full effect. And talking about the other games, I'd like to add another asterisk to this, and I'll have to ask the Judge Tim, his opinion on this. We normally talk on Thursdays, and then you put it up online and whenever. And so we were going to talk yesterday, and I texted you about it, and we didn't. But I have on my notes right here, New York Giants +4, and that it was a play that I made. So I don't know if you're going to count it for me or not.
Can't count it because the listeners didn't benefit from it. Well, not going to count it.
They have, if they want to blame anyone, they got to blame you, because we were supposed to talk yesterday. I don't have a lot of plays this week. I like the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles +3.5. And I'm tempted. I have Jets +6 with question marks. Like, are you really going to bet this? Like, are you that stupid? But I feel like those 2 lines are the ones that are off. The Patriots as a 6-point favorite, I think, is a bit high. And the 49ers, both of those teams are home dogs. And I feel like those are the plays. So that's it. Miami plus 3.5, under 48. Jets plus 6, Philly plus 3.5.
I'll tell you what, Joel, for Judge Tibb, if you make that Jets play and you win, we'll give you the Giants too. They are
I get the parlay of New Jersey, the New Jersey parlay
in our state.
Well, that underscores your belief. You're not going crazy with the bets to try to get back to even. You're only picking the games that you are comfortable with, because you did have 7 bets last week. That doesn't mean you're coming back with 7 this week. So Correct. Even if you have a perfect week, you're still below 500, but it's about getting smart. And then the week after that, and the week after that, the methodical climb back.
Yeah, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So if you lose, don't get crazy. If you win, if you have a really good week, don't get crazy. Just be consistent. And at the end of it all, when you keep betting the best of the numbers, you will profit.
Joel, any other thoughts on the games this weekend, whether it be the Bills or the rest of the league?
I'd like to see some teams that had overperformed expectations to kind of see if they come back down to earth. Saints, Raiders, kind of just see how those games go. I have a friend who we were texting a lot about that Raiders game, and he's like, "What do you think about the Raiders?" And we were talking about all the differences. I'm like, the Ravens, I hate to sound like it, but they're going to get figured out. You can't just rely on Lamar Jackson to do everything every game. They're going to get figured out. I said, like, what's the trend of a team opening a stadium? Now, I know that the Raiders stadium was opened last year, but it was officially open to fans, full capacity. Like what's that going to be? Like, it kind of reminded me of like the Saints post Katrina, when they could finally get people back in. And I said, I love the under on that game. And that game was a stone cold under until they kicked the game tying field goal or whatever it was to send it to overtime, and then it goes over. But we were both like, yeah, the Raiders are an interesting team because they always seem to underperform, but they have all this like publicity now, and they're talking about Vegas, and they're showing the stadium and the Death Star and Al Davis or Mark Davis and all the cool stuff about it. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with a team like that. And even like the Arizona Cardinals, when a team blows out another team that are supposed to be good teams, like 2 good teams, like Tennessee Titans, like it's interesting to see like what happens next week. Do the Titans respond against Seattle? Does Arizona keep this momentum going against Minnesota? Like, it'd be interesting to see how these teams respond. And then when you hit like week 3 is where you start to figure out who they really are, whatever Dennis Green said. So you had to figure out those teams. And again, Chiefs and Ravens, that's going to be a great game. Again, I just think the Ravens, without their running backs, are just a completely one-dimensional team, because Lamar Jackson can throw for 250 yards, but they're all like screens that then get broken for a big gainer. So if you can keep the plays in front of you, like the Bills did when they played the Ravens, I feel like they're just not as great of a team that people think that they are.
Traditionally, Joel, when do you feel comfortable, I guess, with your bets? And again, we made the picks last week because we have to. We didn't have to pick 7, but
right, we did though.
But we did.
Yeah.
When do you start feeling comfortable? How far into a season when you feel like you've had enough information to?
I feel like once you hit like week 3 and 4, you start to see the good and the bad. You can kind of figure out if a team has any type of continuity or they're just all over the place. Will the Cleveland Browns blow another game this week? Will they, throw for 400 yards? What type of teams do we see consistency wise? Will the Raiders keep going? Will the Steelers keep going? Will the Eagles blow out more teams? So once you start to see a couple more games, you start to get familiar with possible injuries and who's coming back and who's not, with like Fitzpatrick being on IR and every running back on the Ravens being out. And, you start to see, what teams are really made of. So I think by weeks 3 and 4 is when you really get comfortable and you don't feel like I do with Jets +6 with a bunch of question marks. Like you like it or you don't like it, but you also can't realize why do I like this? I shouldn't like this, but I do. So, and as we've discussed in the past, when you add your heart into it, you're going to lose more than you win. So you got to be smart with your bets. You got to be smart with your picks. If you see a line that you think is off, bet it, because if you do your research and it's off to you for a number of reasons, then it is off, and bet it and roll the dice.
There are 3 double-digit spreads this week, 4 if you want to count 9.5, which is Arizona giving 9.5 to Jacksonville. But the other double-digit spreads are Cleveland giving 13, or anywhere from 12.5 to 13.5. Actually, you can get Cleveland over Houston. We have just make sure I get them all. Tampa Bay over Atlanta. That's anywhere from 12.5 to 13. And Green Bay is 11.5 point favorite over Detroit. Your thoughts on, and you obviously didn't pick those games, but your thoughts on a double-digit spread this early in a season, given all the things that we just talked about with the lack of information. Do you find that there would be value there in going with the underdog?
That's so back to what we discussed about with teams overperforming, and Houston is most definitely that. Houston, according to some people, was going to be the worst team this year, if not one of the bottom 3 teams, and they played great. So what's going to happen now? So Cleveland's coming off of a game that they should have won against Kansas City, who's arguably the best team in the East, in the AFC. So what now? Like now, what do they do? Are they frustrated? Do they come back hungrier? Do they come back and just destroy a team and blow a team out? And the same for Green Bay. That was probably Aaron Rodgers' worst game of his career, or top 3 worst games of his career. And it looked like him on the sidelines, he didn't even give a shit. So to me, now I could be wrong with like Aaron Rodgers and his fire inside of him to keep playing, but like the way that he looked on the sideline was reminiscent of Joe Flacco. And I've talked about him last season too. Joe Flacco is the ultimate don't give a shit quarterback. Like he played great for Baltimore, got that huge contract, won the Super Bowl. And since then he's just been on cruise control. He'll hold on to the ball all day long. He'll get hit. He'll throw it away. He doesn't care. He'll throw a 2-yard pass on 4th and 8 and just don't care. Just walks off to the field like they just don't care. They're just there for a paycheck. So Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if he's trying to prove a point to somebody or to himself or what the team is going to do, but I would definitely be leery of that. Detroit can run the ball, but they can't do much more than that. They can't defend anything. So that will be an interesting game to see. Double digits this early, that big, are a little scary either side. And Buffalo in 2 weeks is going to be that big of a favorite when they're hosting Houston, unless the Bills lose the next 2. They're going to be a 13-point favorite against Houston. Now that could change obviously in the next, couple of games, but they're going to be a double-digit home favorite against Houston. So, hopefully by that time we'll have a little bit more consistency from the team and a little bit more familiarity with what Houston can actually do and what that game will be like. So, those are always things to really take into account, not only what's going on with this week, but how does this affect the Bills and how will it affect the lines next week and the next week after that?
So to recap, Joel Staniszewski's picks for this week, that being week 2 of the 2021 NFL season: Dolphins +3.5, take the under of 48. And then his 2 non-Bills picks, Eagles +3.5, Jets +6. Joel, let's start crawling back.
One game at a time.
1 week, one game, one pick at a time.
You got it.
I have faith in you, Joel.
I hope so. I don't right now, but I think we're going to be good. There's not a single better or sports book or bookie in this world that doesn't have an off week. Just so happens ours is week 1. So
didn't 9 underdogs win or something like that?
It was a crazy number, and there's a bunch that won outright. So, and I don't just sit there and play favorites or dogs, or there's times where you'll get people that sell picks and their packages are thousands of dollars to buy their picks, like Vegas Dave, who blocked me on Instagram. He's a complete fraud. Like you pay for his picks, and it's like, it would honestly, I can tell you right now what his picks will be. I can tell you right now, Vegas Dave's football picks this week are going to be like Cleveland Browns money line -$7, Tampa Bay money line -750. Like that's all he does is just plays like huge favorite money lines, and anyone can do that. Of course you can. If you have enough money, you can bet every team money line favorite and just ride it out. But the second you start losing 1 or 2, now you're behind because you're laying monstrous favorites. So play smart. Don't listen to dumb fakers. Listen to a smart faker like me.
So Vegas Dave probably had a really bad week 1. Because if he's going, because we're talking about all the dogs that won.
I'm thinking maybe everybody had a bad week 1. Seems
except for the books. The books are probably stoked. They probably are all starting off the week 1 with a nice 15% winner.
But it all evens out.
Oh yeah, for sure. All evens out. Never take it one game or 1 week at a time. Just look at it big picture.
Joel Staniszewski. Thanks as always for joining Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400, or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.